Yeah, so one of the ideas in playoff matchups and their importance is the idea of stars playing at their best and whether the other team can limit them or take anything that they do well away, or if the role players are going to be forced into more possessions and more attempts. Um, it's hard to imagine with Jokic someone taking everything he does well away because he can go to something else if a team is scheming against him in a specific way. Similarly, I think Jamal does that on some levels where he can counter, especially because their biggest weapon is pick and roll with each other. Um, we're not going to go over every single matchup detail team wise, but we wanted to hone in on Jamal and some of the potential advantages and disadvantages for this first round, since I think a lot of the success of the Nuggets uh, rests on his shoulders. And I think he's kind of an interesting player where, he's been hurt this season. He's kind of frustrated uh, Nuggets fans in some ways just because he turns it over, or he's dribbling too much, or whatever. He's not living up to the standards that they expect. So I think the
From the
Nuggets
playoffs,
often,
anyway.
yeah, at least, yeah, the regular season Jamal. But
He is like an all-time great in the playoffs, by the way. So he really like sets the bar high, right? Because like the finals where he was like 2010 and 5, it was just like him and
ridiculous.
Magic Johnson and Michael Jordan and Jokic that
Yeah,
had ever done, or like LeBron, right? That had
yeah,
done that.
yeah. I think it's just people kind of have been getting used to him in the way that he plays, where he's a floor general at some points and he's assisting and he's distributing and he's playmaking. And other times we want him to be a scorer and we want him to take shots and we want him to be aggressive. And he's always trying to find that balance as he's playing. What are your assessments of Jamal and how he like fits in with the Nuggets and his importance to carrying us all the way?
I think one of the things that makes Jamal so different from the other elite guards in the NBA, and we have a lot of them, and a lot of them came from University of Kentucky. All of the NBA teams need to just hire Kentucky
Yeah,
scouts because they'll
yeah,
find you a top 20 player in the form of a guard that can just create offense for you for some reason
yeah,
every time. Is that Jamal is a counter puncher. He, unlike most of the other elite guards that you might just put them above him, at least in a regular season context, is that he doesn't necessarily have one or two sort of go to impose my will on the game moves, right? Harden had his step back three. Steph is running all over the place off the ball to get to his threes from everywhere, right? And when he was younger, he was getting to the rim a lot too. SGA has that step back in the mid range. So that he has that like snatch back, like really nasty move that's really hard to defend. And it's not like Jamal isn't like a high level at any one of those things. He does a lot of them well, actually, but not
yeah.
quite any one at an elite level. I would say that if you had to pick one go to move that Jamal tries to impose his will on the game, is he uses his size a lot in the post, a lot more than really any other guard that I see in the NBA.
Yeah.
Um,
Underrated in that aspect.
yes, but he doesn't have that like first strike kind of move. I think that one of the things that does change between the regular season and the playoffs is that he might hunt his 3-point shot more. He's great from the mid range too, but it's not like SGA where you know exactly what he's trying to get to every time. You still can't stop it. Jamal is constantly reading not just how the team is being defended, but how he's being defended. And he has this like very fluid quality to his game to where you can't necessarily guess what he's going to do on any given possession. Even when you know he's trying to score, you don't know what he's trying to get to. And I think that that lends itself to not just inconsistency in the regular season, but I think inconsistency in the level of aggression. A lot of people who are Nuggets fans also point to the fact that he plays with Jokic. They play within this team system, and he doesn't try to force things for the most part. I think he had a couple of games earlier in the season where he did that, but I haven't really seen it too much this season where I'm annoyed at him for dribbling the air out of the ball too much, right?
Yeah.
Um, but the other reason that he isn't as aggressive is that I think part of what he's doing is trying to read how he is being defended. He's not always bending the defense. He's more reacting to small moves and mistakes that the defense or individual defender is making. And like you said, he has a lot of different responsibilities compared to some of these other guards. I would say that probably uh, Fox and Maxi are the closest comps in terms of the responsibility they have on the floor, both as the primary ball handler, primary playmaker in terms of being the floor general, and being, at least in the playoffs, not as much in the regular season, being the sort of 1B offensive option for scoring purposes as well. He carried over the leap that he made or demonstrated that he'd made in playmaking from the playoffs last year into this season. He's averaging a career high in assists. He's really good at creating all kinds of angles for getting Jokic the ball more than anybody, but he's also finding other guys on the floor, both in transition and in the half court, more than he had at other points in his career. So he has both his um, combo guard scorer mode, and he also can go into this point guard mode. And it's been really an interesting um, season to see the points in different games where that switch has flipped. I do think I just wanted to talk about the 18-point comeback that they had against the Warriors. Really started when Jamal went into floor general point guard mode in that fourth quarter. And not that he wasn't necessarily having issues scoring, but the way that the team was operating, the best way to get the best shots every time with the way the Warriors were defending was for Jamal to be in point guard mode. And so I think Jokic was obviously also involved, but he assisted on maybe half the buckets that they made during that comeback that ended with the Jokic game winner.
Yeah. And speaking of that, we want to go into some specific, just little matchup details with the possible first round matchups that the Nuggets have, which are Lakers and Pelicans, obviously. Um, so we wanted to start with the Pelicans. Um, Obviously, they have CJ McCollum, they have Dyson Daniels, and Herb Jones, who is he going to be guarding Jamal all the time? Probably
I
not.
don't think they're going to have her Jamal a lot because that would necessitate either CJ sitting on the bench or putting CJ on AG or MPJ, which I don't think is a good idea, both for rebounding purposes and like AG is just going to post CJ up if
Yeah.
and take advantage of that mismatch if that's what the Pelicans try to do. So I think CJ will probably spend some time on Jamal, but more likely it'll be or Herb Jones will be more on AG, and then CJ will be spending some time between KCP and Jamal.
And Trey Murphy sometimes as well.
Yeah, Trey
Um,
Murphy off the bench.
and so Jamal only played one game against the Pelicans this season, but I was noticing that, like you were saying, Jamal is, for his size, a little underrated, and he can go into the post. He can go into the post. I saw him post up CJ. He doesn't have a problem getting space between pretty much any of the defenders on the Pelicans. And after this play, where he posted up and got a little step back on CJ, he did it again, right to Dyson. There's the oop. There's the oop that you love
He's
of.
been reading. He's been reading those so well. Jamal loves to do this little hop after he throws a lob pass, right when the the roller is going up for the dunk.
But yeah, you love the hop. He does it every time. But yeah, here's another, ISO like this. He's a very shifty player in isolation, and I think is an advantage for us with the Pelicans. I think their rim protection's a little suspect.
Non-existent.
I mean, do you really have questions about pick and roll with Valanciunas and whoever is the other guard that's being put in here?
No, I do not. I do think that putting Dyson and or Herb or Trey in pick and roll uh, could be an issue just because I think they're decent screen navigators. I have questions about Trey, but in terms of attacking any of those guys in isolation, I think Jamal is actually pretty comfortable against the Pelicans players. The Pelicans have excellent perimeter defense in general. In particular, Herb and Dyson are really, really good with uh, speed guards, but I think that they can struggle with shiftier guards. It's the case with Jamal, even when he is just kind of going one on one on guys in ISO, he's able to create separation pretty well. I think a lot of people that are listening to this might just say, well, oh, you're a homer. You just really like Jamal Murray. I do like Jamal Murray a lot. He's one of my favorite players. But I've also seen that the Pelicans struggle with players like SGA in terms of those shiftier players that can just get you off balance more. And it's less about using, say, brute speed or strength in the matchup.
Yeah, I think even defensively, Jamal, I don't think has like a huge role that he has to fulfill against them. I think he's put on CJ a lot. He just has to do those little things like when people are skip passing to the weak side and he's trying to like zone up and he's got to close out on a shooter. Like he's just got to make sure he's doing that and putting in the effort all the time. I think when I was watching some of the tape on Pelicans Nuggets, he was sometimes giving up once his main responsibility has gone away and he's kind of in help. It gets swung over there and he's not ready. So if he's just
Right.
focused, he'll be good. Which I know he will be in a playoff matchup because we haven't seen them play the Pelicans yet. But I don't think the Pelicans have enough personnel collectively to really make a dent in the Nuggets. Just because they don't have an answer for Jokic specifically. They don't really have anyone that's really going to slow down Jamal too much. Because Jamal doesn't even have a lot of attempts when Herb is on him. Like they'll just reset and run a little
Yeah.
handoff or do whatever and get somebody switched on to Jamal. That's a
Yeah.
better
They're
matchup
going
for
to
him.
hunt matchups, and the Pelicans tend to give those up pretty easily because they're trying to contain. So they'll give up some of those switches that other teams are trying to force. But I think Jamal's pretty important in this matchup, but I don't think he has to be amazing in this
Yeah,
series, even because Jokic is really the best matchup
yeah.
against the Pelicans. They have nothing for him. He has a personal vendetta against Jonas Valanciunas, and even Larry Nance Jr. can't do anything with him. He thinks that Jokic has had the best game that he's ever seen against him, uh,
Yeah.
like he said on that one podcast. But yeah, I'm not worried about Jamal in the matchup, especially because he can go into playmaking mode. So I do think that Jamal has an advantage in that sense, but there are definitely things to look out for that are sort of yellow to red flags in this matchup. One of them is that the Pelicans are obviously a very big team, a very long team, and they really like to force turnovers. And that is kind of the story of whenever the Nuggets play the Pelicans and it ends up being a close game. Um, whether the Nuggets win it or not, is that there's usually some stretch where the Nuggets are just constantly turning the ball over, and they are a ball movement team. So high turnover games are going to happen, and they will especially happen in a matchup where the other team is specifically trying to force them. And the Pelicans are also a team that can go through bouts of turning the ball over because they don't have a lot of playmaking, and I don't think they have the best connective passing in their rotation. So if you force them to pass the ball a lot, chances are you'll be able to get them to turn over.
If Murray was cooking the Lakers in the playoffs and throughout the regular season, as we've seen, and they have AD, who's better pick and roll defender than Valanciunas, because what I was seeing with Valanciunas and his footwork being really slow and drop against Murray, like, I mean, we can kind of shift to the Lakers right now because we're going to also talk about that because it kind of relates. Where when AD was in the Western Conference Finals trying to guard the pocket pass on the pick and roll with Jokic and Murray, Murray just goes up into a shot. So it's like, okay, you're taking that away. I'm just going to shoot. Do you want to talk about the Torian Prince example that you
Yeah, sure.
told?
So Torian is a like he's decent at perimeter containment, but you don't want him guarding the other team's best guard. And one of the reasons why is Torian is pretty easily shed in an off-ball action. So let's say it's not Jamal initiating necessarily in pick and roll, but if he's coming off of something off ball, multiple screens, even just one, to come get a handoff and then initiate pick and roll, it's like Torian wasn't even there. This is pretty similar to how the Nuggets approached the Lakers putting Vanderbilt on Jamal in last year's Western Conference Finals. But uh, Torian can stay on the floor because he can do some stuff offensively. Part of what happened with Vanderbilt was that he got played off the floor offensively. But defensively, I don't think that he really ended up affecting Jamal that much because they just shifted to having Jamal move off the ball. It's not like other defenders where there are some defenders that I might have questions about them sort of ball watching and kind of losing people off ball, and it's a focus thing. That's not the case with Torian. He's constantly trying to fight through these screens, but he's just not, I think, fast enough to get through them. And he is like a just a slightly bigger wing. So that's
Yeah,
not a matchup that I'm really worried about at all for Jamal.
yeah. I don't think he would play much in a first round series. Vando got played off the floor offensively, but who got played off the floor defensively? We all
So
remember.
D'Angelo Russell, I think, has been trying harder on defense this season than anything I saw from him last year. The problem is that Jamal doesn't really feel him at all, and D'Lo is pretty bad even when he tries at guarding pick and roll. Um, the Lakers in general have this issue where they really struggle in any matchup that requires them to communicate a lot defensively. And so they end up with a lot of blown assignments. I think it's part of the reason that the Lakers end up giving up so many wide open threes compared to other teams. It's not just a scheme thing. Um, but the other thing is, even one on one, Jamal is very comfortable in the matchup with D'Lo, with AR, with Torian. I mean, I don't think that there's any player on the Lakers roster that can make Jamal feel uncomfortable. I think that's part of the reason that the series, in my opinion, last year, the Lakers series was the easiest of the four. Not just the AD Jokic matchup, but because Jamal was just completely comfortable the entire time. So he averaged like 32 points on like 50, 40, 90 shooting
Yeah,
in those 4 games.
yeah. The Lakers just don't have the big guards to really cause any problems for him. They just don't have defensive
Or
minded
even make
players in
him
those
work,
positions.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that was the series. I mean, Nuggets fans were confident in the Nuggets all last season, but that was the series where people were really starting to give Jamal credit for what he was doing in the postseason and realizing that he was a star and that he's a top 20 player in the league. And yeah, he was super comfortable. He was hitting insane jump shots. He was just destroying the Lakers. He looked very comfortable. And I know Lakers fans were very frustrated watching it. And it's kind of hard to talk about just Jamal against the Lakers because that series was so interesting in terms of the whole Nuggets math
Yeah.
problem of like, you're gonna do this, they're gonna do that. Like
A
MPJ had a
lot
great
of
series.
different high-level counters happening on both ends of the court from both teams. But just a last note on Jamal defensively is that in this matchup, both in the playoffs last year and throughout the regular season series between these two teams, they definitely tried to target Jamal a lot in on switches. They try to target Jamal with switches on LeBron. I suspect that they're also going to do the same with Rui Hachimura because they've been using Rui as a mismatch attacker a lot. LeBron, when he's doing it, also likes to run a lot of two-man actions with Austin Reeves, a lot of pick and pop, a lot of ghost screens, just to try to uh, force mistakes in the communication on those switches. And it did end up being somewhat effective for them in the Western Conference Finals last year because the Nuggets ended up, once they stopped giving LeBron the switches that he wanted, they would hedge, and that would kind of leave AR wide open. So that could put the Nuggets in rotation. There's lots of different things that the Lakers can try to do. But generally speaking, when the Nuggets do give up the switch, and they have been doing it a lot in the post with guys that try to hunt mismatches in the post. They've given up the switch onto Jamal a fair amount this season. We saw it against the Lakers. We saw it against the Celtics. We saw it against the Mavs with Luka. And some guys are just they're gonna score because they're bigger than him. But sometimes they get a stop on those possessions, and it's kind of frustrating for the other guy. That's like LeBron and Luka in particular. I recall Jaylen Brown had no problem attacking Jamal in the post, but he also had no problem with any other nugget. Even the teams that do have a big athletic wing to guard LeBron are sometimes going to have to give up a switch uh, on LeBron in the post, and he's going to be hunting smaller players. So that's not a Nuggets specific issue. It's just something that will probably come up if these teams do play each other in round one.